Thanks for joining us today. I'm Nancy Furness, and this is We've Got Issues. We're recording here today at the City Centre Library in Coquitlam, and we'd like to just express our gratitude to the library for giving us a place to film these interviews. Before we get started, I'd also like to acknowledge that our interviews are taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of Coquitlam First Nation. So we thank the Coquitlam people who continue to live on these lands and to care for the lands and the waters and all that lies above and below. Today we're joined by Laura Dupont, who is a longtime Port Coquitlam resident and who is taking a run for the federal NDP. So she's the federal NDP candidate for Coquitlam-Port Coquitlam. So thanks for joining us today, Laura.
Happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Well, we're quite far out from the federal election. It's still more than a year to go. Momentum is building already, and I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about what you've already started doing? Like, where are you in the community, and what are you doing to prepare for the upcoming federal election?
So we know that we have a provincial election this fall, so people are pretty focused on that right now. Those issues, provincial issues, are important. But I think once we get that provincial election under our belts, you're going to see us popping up everywhere and being a bit more vocal as a campaign. So I've pulled a really awesome group of people together to be my campaign team. And I've got a few good folks who have run campaigns with me before when I ran for City Council. And I've got a lot of new young people who are super energetic, extremely skilled and talented and full of great ideas, and we have a great dynamic when we get together. I really enjoy the company, and I actually really look forward to when we have our meetings and get-togethers, because it's a really good dynamic that feels like community building at the grassroots level.
Well, so you've already pulled together a campaign committee, and it sounds like you're well on your way and well organized. So we'll look forward to seeing more and hearing more from you over the next year and a half. So for now, I just want to talk a little bit about why you decided to run for the NDP, and I just want to talk about a few different issues, if that's okay. So I just want to start with a tough one, which is affordability. Yeah. So we're seeing it becoming harder to get housing, harder to access medical care. We see over 10% of the population now in Canada living in poverty. So a lot of these folks are from a more vulnerable population. We have seniors, we have veterans, we have disabled community, children. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what the NDP's plan is to ensure that these services are accessible and affordable to everyone, and that nobody falls through the cracks?
Yeah, I will admit I'm dismayed by what I see in terms of growing poverty in Canada, and especially the growing homelessness issue, because it seems to me in the past 5 to 10 years it's really gotten a lot worse in our communities. All over Metro Vancouver, you hear it from all kinds of people talking about how many homeless people there are. And I really think in a country as wealthy as Canada, I think that's an absolute policy failure. I just don't think we should have people in the numbers that are falling through the cracks. It's not right, and we're failing to take care of Canadians if we are seeing that level of homelessness. So there's a few important things that I think the NDP are trying to do, and I have a lot of faith in the NDP because I feel like they are the party that doesn't cater to corporations, isn't working for the billionaires, but is trying to take care of working families in Canada. And so that's what appeals to me about our party. I also think they're super inclusive and thoughtful in the policies that they bring forward. And I'm really proud of what they've achieved in the last couple of years in the House of Commons. It feels right now like the system's a bit rigged. It's not working for the population. It's working really well for billionaires and corporations, and I think that needs to change. So Jugmeat's doing a town hall series throughout the country, and it's called Change the Rules, and I think that's exactly what we need in this country, is to change the rules, because they weren't written for us. They were written to cater to people who have plenty of wealth and don't have to worry about putting a roof over their head or feeding their families. So those are really important things. The NDP has worked really hard to use its leverage in Ottawa to get a national pharma care program, a national dental care program, which by the end of it will provide dental care for over 9 million Canadians. So that's a lot of Canadians who currently don't have dental care. And I think that's pretty problematic, because people who don't have healthy oral health often have other health issues. It can lead to cardiovascular problems and all kinds of health issues that cost our healthcare system a lot. So these things that the NDP have done, pharmacare, dental care, daycare, a school food program, have the ability to lower the cost of living for Canadians. All those programs make us healthier, and they save us money as a country. So I think I am really proud of our party for bringing forward those policies, getting them passed in the House of Commons with only 24 members of Parliament. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's kind of punching above your weight a little bit there. And I think this kind of leads into something else, and it's about the economy. So we have these people, this vulnerable portion of the population, I guess, that has been struggling to access services, and you've talked a little bit about how some of that has been worked on with the support of the NDP. But I think since COVID, we've seen a change in the way that people work job-wise. There's more of these low-paying jobs and sort of, I guess you call it precarious type employment, unstable employment. And that, of course, feeds into the fact that they can't access these services, right? They're falling below the poverty line. What does the NDP have in mind as far as having a stable economy that ensures that everyone, has a good wage and a good way of making a living?
So I believe at its core, the NDP is Canada's de facto Labour Party. What they do in terms of policies is to work for working Canadians. We've seen under Justin Trudeau, average rental costs in the country go up 100%. Who can afford that? We've seen really huge increases in the cost of housing.
I knew it was a lot. I didn't realize it was 100.
When I read that statistic, I was shocked, and that is not okay.
And wages haven't gone up
No.
100%.
Definitely, and that's the problem. Wages and benefits have not gone up. So I think when we're dealing with parties like the Conservatives and the Liberals that cater to corporations and billionaires, the checks and balances that we have for working families are good union jobs. The NDP believes that we need to fight for fair bargaining. Working Canadians deserve the right to bargain fairly, to negotiate good contracts. They deserve to keep the pensions that they've worked for. They deserve good benefits. They deserve sick days when they're ill. They deserve all the benefits that union jobs bring Canadians. So that's a big part of, I think, when it comes to the questions in and around the economy. Those are the checks and balances that work for working Canadians. And maybe are a bit of a change from the status quo, and that's what the NDP is fighting for.
Well, I know I personally have a pension, and sometimes people say to me, oh, you're so lucky you have this pension, right? But I turn around and I say to them, you should have a pension too. Instead of saying, oh, you've got a pension and I don't, it's like, let's get everybody a pension, above and beyond the Canada pension plan, which is probably not sufficient for most of us, right?
What happens when workers don't have pensions?
Exactly.
When they retire, are they more prone to fall below the poverty line? Are they more prone to be precariously housed? Those are problems that inevitably will fall on society. So it is for the benefit of everyone if people have that, a lot of Canadians, and ideally every one of them, to have a pension so that they can live comfortably in their senior years and enjoy the fruits of their labor because they've worked their whole lives.
And in dignity too.
And lives of dignity, absolutely, that is extremely important. a little bit of money for a rainy day. Those are the things Canadians work hard for. They deserve those things.
And we have the ability and the means to do it, right? It's just a matter of priorities.
That's absolutely right. We need to switch our priorities. We need to ease up on the subsidies and the tax breaks to big corporations that continue to commodify housing, continue to make it out of reach because it's basically catering to people who just want to invest their money in real estate. Those are homes that people need to keep a roof over their head. So that is something the NDP will fight for, to make sure that homes aren't used for investments and that we don't cater to corporate landlords. Instead, we work for Canadian families working hard to keep a roof over their head and feed their families.
Okay, I have a question that's kind of related to that then. Right now we're seeing a lot of new families come in, immigration, and a lot of those responsibilities have been kind of downloaded to the municipal level. So we're looking at infrastructure, new schools, all the things the services that need to be provided for those families, and we're seeing people continue to struggle. You had just talked about housing and precarious housing. What would NDP do to, address the affordable housing crisis?
So that's a really important question, and I think a lot of people are wondering about that, and I hear that a lot on the doorstep. People's top priorities are housing and the high cost of groceries, the cost of living. Everybody talks about groceries right now. So that's an important question. I think that the Liberal government has done a great job at bringing people into Canada from other countries, and that's great, but you have to have housing for them. We don't want to bring people into Canada and have them precariously housed or struggling to find homes. That doesn't benefit anyone.
We want to make sure everyone's welcome and everybody has access to the needs.
Absolutely. People deserve lives of dignity, and Canadians work really hard every day when they go to work, and they deserve to have the basic needs met, which, a roof over your head, feed your family, live lives of dignity. That is a really important priority for the NDP. And so we need to make sure we have housing. We need to build more housing, definitely, but what kind of housing are we building? Are we building, condominiums for
Luxury condominiums?
Are we building luxury homes, or are we going to build co-op housing? Are we going to build rental stock for every community across the country? Are we going to build homes that can get people with low incomes housed? Those are the types of housing that we need to make sure are being built, not just homes for investors.
Right. No, thank you for giving a fulsome answer on that. I think it is a big issue and it's not getting any easier, right? So it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. And I apologize, we're going to jump around and cover just because there's so much to talk about, right? And can we talk about climate change?
Yes, we can, absolutely.
So, as you know well, we're seeing increasingly hot summers. In 2021, I think we had an unprecedented heat dome. We saw over 600 people here in BC die as a result of that. So what is the NDP's plan to address the climate crisis? Do you have some thoughts you can offer us on that?
Absolutely. So I think the heat dome deaths in BC were just tragic. They were avoidable, and I think it's inexcusable that people are dying every day from issues of extreme weather and the climate crisis. That needs to change. There is no order of government, in my mind, that is doing anywhere near enough on the climate file. That is a really important issue that needs to be top of mind for anybody who's going to run for any order of government in the future. The flooding that we just saw in Toronto is going to cost Toronto many times more than what the last flooding cost them. We're hearing about floods and fires and
wildfires everywhere, starting in February.
In every province in this country and territory. It's something we are not dealing with, and we need to start talking about it more and finding real policy solutions. So I also think, I just want to talk about young people for a minute, because this really matters to me, and it's a big part of why I'm running federally. honestly, sometimes I can't sleep at night. I'm so worried about the next generation. I don't think we're doing right by the next generation, and we need to. And so I think some of the issues that the NDP is proposing in and around the climate crisis are to just take better care of Canadians. You know, back to making sure that they are able to be employed and have housing, so that when disaster hits, people are supported by government programs. Switching things like the $33 billion in fossil fuel subsidies to public programs that make sure that we have resilient.
So $33 billion?
$33 billion is what we subsidize the fossil fuel industry in Canada.
So what we could do with that money.
Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau continues to build pipelines and lock us into a fossil fuel future. We know there are better options, and there is green energy options out there that can work for Canadians across the country. But we're not seeing them developed because we're too busy on the hamster wheel that is the status quo. We got to bring down our emissions. Just the weather today here is extremely hot.
Very warm.
Yeah, and we're starting to see more problems. People are going to start having more health problems. We're seeing a loss of biodiversity. We're losing our freshwater resources. These are really big problems that we need to deal with. So I think that the NDP's approach is to let's handle these issues head on. Let's not pretend everything's okay. The Conservatives continue to fail in admitting that we are living in a climate crisis. These disasters are costing us a lot of money. We're paying increased insurance rates. All these issues are falling on the backs of poor people, and we need climate justice. We need to take care of people across the spectrum and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions so we can have a more hopeful future.
Well, and you talk about increased insurance prices. I think at some point, some people can't even get insurance now. So the bottom line is the cost will come back to the individual, and we'll be bearing those costs ourselves at some point directly. So it's something that we're already seeing a lot of effects, and we will see more and more as we go along, I think. Okay, a subject that's also near and dear to my heart is reconciliation. We've heard a lot of talk about reconciliation. We've seen some action. We have seen some good work done. But I honestly feel like there's so much more that needs to be done. Does the NDP have any path forward on this, or is there anything that you think that should be done that's not already, in place?
You're right, Nancy. I think we are failing to do right by Indigenous people in Canada. It's something, we've got a lot of work to do, and there's another area where we need to roll up our sleeves and get working and being more inclusive, ensuring that Indigenous, Métis and Inuit Canadians are able to take part in our orders of government and be included in our systems and our institutions. Far too often we see a big absence of that, and I think that that's a problem. There is so much rich Indigenous culture in our country, languages that need to be retained, and heritage that is really important. And I think that we need to encourage that, make sure that we continue to celebrate that. The Liberals and the Conservatives haven't done anything, much of anything, to move the dial on reconciliation. A couple numbers I want to throw out. The National Inquiry on the Missing and Murdered and Indigenous Women and Girls. The country of Canada has only accepted 2 out of the 231 recommendations in that report.
2 out of 231?
231. That is an appalling failure, and that's something that needs to change. On the report on Truth and Reconciliation, we've only accepted 13 of the 94 recommendations. That's a problem. We are obviously not doing enough work to ensure that Indigenous communities have clean water to drink, that they have safe housing to live in, and that they aren't facing an unfair level of appalling discrimination in our healthcare system. Those are the things that need to change, and the NDP is committed to those things and to rooting everything that they do on this issue in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People.
You know, you say healthcare, I would also add justice system.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we're seeing the 60 scoop kind of continue, right? There's so much that can be done on that, but yeah, we'll look forward to hearing more, and I think, you know, we'll come back and talk about this again closer to the election, because we're still a year and a half out. So
I want to just quickly say, you're right. Indigenous people are by far disproportionately represented within our justice system and our prisons, and I think that is an appalling red flag that we really need to deal with.
So lots of work to be done there. What's stopping us from doing that right now?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess you know, that might be a good question for the government in power. I can't answer that question, but I just think we're just stuck in this institutional status quo. And I think those two reports that I mentioned and the low numbers of the recommendations that we've accepted as a country to move forward with, I think that's a great place for us to start.
I think that shows that there's a lot of work left to be done.
Yeah.
So, talking about inclusivity and things like that, Canada is a very diverse place, right? We have so many people from so many different places, and we always think that we're this tolerant, kind of welcoming country, but we are seeing increased levels of discrimination, hate speech and hate crime, both online and, you know, directly aimed, gender and ethnic-based violence. What do we do about that? Or what would the NDP, I know that's a big question, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think meaningful policies on being inclusive communities are really, really important. You're right, growing polarization is a big problem, especially politically. People are getting really divided and really angry about issues, and I think that's something we need to pay attention to and not ignore it. Our democracy is extremely important, as is our media, and I just want to say that this group and you doing this interview fills a bit of a gap in a changing media landscape that I'm concerned about. We're starting to see real centralization of the media in Canada and a lot of loss of local media outlets, keeping an eye on what's going on in our communities. I think that's a red flag for democracy and is problematic. We need to make sure that there is funding available, and not just grants, but sustained funding available to keep strong media presence in all areas of our community, because it's so important for our democracy.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a healthy public media is key to a strong democracy, and once you see that eroding, then you have to start asking questions, like where are we going from here? And so many stories never get told.
Yes, and Peter Julian, Member of Parliament for New Westminster, he has done some really good work to bring forward some bills in the House of Commons. And some of them have to do with providing support and a framework for people who are facing terrible situations online or in person, where they're faced with hate crimes or situations like that. Providing a framework and a place to go so that they can be protected and have a bit of a framework to seek redress in situations like that is important. And I also,
it's a little bit of a Wild West.
It is a Wild West. There isn't a lot out there to protect people, and I think that's one way we can make positive change. And another thing I think we need to have the discussion about is we have some billionaires running some social media networks, like X and Meta. And, they blew a hissy fit when Canada wanted to ensure that they provided news for Canadians on their social media outlets. And they have stopped allowing news, on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, other ones probably. And I think that's deeply problematic, especially when Canadians are faced with situations of climate disasters or emergencies. I don't think it's okay that people who utilize social media are unable to access any level of news. So I think that's something we need to start having conversations about. I'm not so sure that those social media companies are serving Canadians well when they're keeping it
Controlling.
Yes, controlling it and not allowing for news.
We certainly see enough advertisements.
Yeah.
But the news, yeah, and that personally caused me a lot of grief because that's how I shared
Absolutely.
things out, and now it's much more difficult.
And it makes it hard to hold governments accountable, and I think that's a problem too. If you can share, posts on social media and share news, you're going to be able to engage people in the community to push back against things that are unfair or wrong. And if you don't have that, it's a real gap.
Okay, I want to, and I hope it's okay if I bring this up, but I've heard criticism about the federal NDP party, and this is what the criticism is. It's basically saying that you're working so closely with the Liberal Party, and I know that there is an agreement for the NDP to support the Liberal Party on confidence and budget kind of votes in exchange sort of for movement forward on some of the NDP's key priorities. So a couple of questions around that. First of all, what are your key priorities? What is so important that you need to collaborate with the Liberal government? And secondly, how do you differ from the Liberal government?
That is such a great question, and I know there's a big narrative out there, and I think it comes sometimes straight from Pierre Poilievre. He likes to call us a coalition government, which is not true. He likes to talk about these partnerships or whatever with these two parties, these formal partnerships. Well, we are not in a coalition government, and we are not tightly tied as a party to the Liberals. What we have done is used our leverage as a party to sign a supply and confidence agreement to get good things for Canadians. And I'll just say that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are really great about complaining about situations, but I haven't seen them move a lot of policy forward to benefit Canadians. The NDP has achieved a national pharmacare program, a dental care program, a school food program, daycare, the list goes on.
So these are the key priorities that you have worked with the Liberals to push forward?
Those are the key priorities in the supply and confidence agreement that the NDP have achieved. Those things are meaningful policies that bring down the cost of living for Canadians, make us healthier, and save us money as a country. But we get demonized for that work. I don't think it's a bad thing that we've achieved good things for Canadians, and I think the NDP plans to continue to use that leverage and do that work to get important policies passed for Canadians that level the playing field and reduce the issues around poverty and homelessness that we see in our communities. So I'm unapologetic of that supply and confidence agreement. It has done well for Canadians.
Well, I think it's a way to use your power.
Absolutely.
So, and for good initiatives. So thanks for sharing that. I was just a little unclear on how that works. So thanks for clarifying it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share all your thoughts. I know it was a lot of questions sort of all over the place, so I really appreciate you answering all of those. And we're coming up to a provincial election this October, and then next October, 2025, is our federal election.
Correct. October 20th, 2025 is the next federal election. And I'll be out in the community. I'm talking to people in our community every day, and we're having community coffee chats at various coffee shops throughout the community. If people want to watch my social media accounts, they can see where we're going to be. I try and be everywhere so that I'm accessible, and I really welcome people to come and talk to me about the issues that matter to them, and tell me your stories. I want to hear from you. A big part of this work right now, even though I'm starting really early, is to listen. I love talking to people, but I also think it's really important that I listen. So we're out there listening to people. Join me for a community coffee chat. We have them every couple weeks, and I look forward to talking to everyone who wants to chat.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So people should follow you on social media, watch out for those coffee chats. And watch out for you around town,
Yep.
because you're going to be out and about and talking to people, ready to listen and take their concerns forward to Ottawa. So thank you so much, Laura, again, for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for watching We've Got Issues. We've been speaking with Laura Dupont, who is the NDP federal candidate for the riding of Coquitlam-Port Coquitlam.